Hi, kia ora, and welcome to Creative Connections, where we have beautiful, inspiring conversations with artists living in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm your host, Mandy Jakic. Hi, and welcome back to the podcast, which is now called Creative Connections. It is really exciting to have a new brand and to be starting a little bit of a new journey. So I'm glad that you're along here with me for the ride, and let's get on with the show. So this week, our episode with Alva is sponsored by the Mandarin Tree Gallery. The Mandarin Tree is a unique and vibrant art gallery located in Gordonton, which is just north of Hamilton. Owner and gallery curator Claudia Elderink started the gallery in 2014. She is an artist herself who has also been on the podcast, and she supports emerging and established artists by featuring a large variety of work including paintings, ceramics, prints, sculpture, garden art, and her own beehive works. The gallery has evolved and grown over the years and proudly represents a talented group of artists from all over Aotearoa. You must go in and see them next time you're down Hamilton ways. Ngā mihi nui, thank you very, very much, Claudia and the Mandarin Tree Gallery, for supporting the podcast and for really believing in what I do. This episode, I'm speaking with Alva. Alice is a multidisciplinary artist based in Kirikiriroa, Hamilton, New Zealand. Her work is informed by an interest in patterns, ornamentation, architecture, and craft-based processes. In addition to her art and design work, Alice is also an art educator and a māmā to her daughter Daphne. She is an advocate for the visual arts in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and is on the executive committee of ANZAAE, which is the Aotearoa New Zealand Association of Art Educators. This episode is our very first episode with our new podcast name, Creative Connections. Same podcast, different name and branding. I so enjoyed meeting Alice and we had the best chat. We talk about materiality, what mediums in art might be taken more seriously than others, the challenges of attitudes to embroidery or textiles in the art world, the different ways textiles can be viewed, and what Alice loves about craft-based art. Alice shares how she combined painting and design after studying both visual arts and design early in her career, and why she moved from computer-based design to teaching high school art. We explore how she came to embroidery, how her embroidery practice has developed over the years, becoming an integral part of her creative practice. Alice talks about her sketchbook or workbook practice, her interest in ornamentation, and how she has brought all the disciplines, styles, and themes of her practice together. We discuss how the shift in scale working on murals excites and exhausts her and provides balance to her practice. We delve into how Alice's priorities and approaches have shifted since becoming a mother and the ways she shares her making process with her daughter, why and in what ways nature inspires her, how using text and the titles of her work helps her to communicate things that are important to her, and so much more. So let's get into it. You're going to get so much from this conversation. You can see Alice's beautiful work at her two galleries, the Mandarin Tree Gallery in Hamilton and also Masterworks in Auckland. Kia ora, Alice.
Kia ora, Mandy.
Welcome to the Creative Matters podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for being here. It's so nice to meet you. I completely love your art practice. It feels very much in line with the things that I love to do. And I found it very inspiring learning more about you. You were born in Hamilton in 1986 in Kirikiriroa, and you live there now. You've returned after some years of being away. What do you love about Hamilton?
What I love about Hamilton, I suppose, is I enjoy the temperate climate here, which is a funny thing to say. But yeah, I really love being able to grow a garden full of flowers. I really love, that when often New Zealand, gets hit by these storms and, this kind of outrageous weather, Hamilton's kind of an afterthought, or it kind of bypasses us. And so after having lived in Wellington for a number of years, where you're constantly battling the environment, I think coming back to Kirikiriroa, there's something kind of consistent about the weather, and that makes me feel a bit more consistent as well. I really love the community in Kirikiriroa, especially the arts and creative community. It's quite a close-knit community where, it's self-sustaining, and most of us know one another, or we know of one another. But because of the size of it, it allows people to feel like they are part of the community. It's not too large, or it's not niche. You don't have to find your niche to feel a part of something greater. And that's fueled by a lot of people that I might have studied with and have come back to Hamilton as well. So I really love that aspect of it.
Yeah, and community is so important, isn't it, to sort of feel part of something and to have like-minded people around you. I find it means a lot. You're a multidisciplinary artist and you work with all sorts of different materials. Textile is a big part of what you do, textile art, which to me sort of feels like, I guess, all of the people I've spoken to on the podcast who have that sort of textile element to their art practice, often there is something in their family that sort of brought that to the fore, that actually influenced them, and then you've sort of either carried on with that or returned to it. So in your childhood, was there something happening around you that was inspiring you in that way?
We've always come from my family probably wouldn't call themselves creative, but they are. And we've, my nana used to always do kind of cross-stitch embroideries. There's this kind of there's this embroidery that went missing, and it's like this family law that, I don't know, I think it was supposed to belong to my brother, but it went missing and no one knows where it went to. So, there's also this kind of entanglement or possession tied up in that sort of thing. Mum used to always make our clothes and things like that. We didn't really have heaps of money, so I think we turned to crafts out of necessity. And for me, I've just always been attracted to different materials. The embroidery floss that I use in a lot of my artwork, I originally came to that when I used to plait friendship bracelets or do kind of hair braids, and I was always, try and convince mum or dad to take me down to David's Emporium to buy that kind of embroidery floss, and I always love picking up in that and just thinking about the possibilities of what I could do with that material. And, it would, be convincing mum's friends and things like that to do these kind of wraps, these braided wraps in their hair and that sort of thing. I got my first embroidery kit probably when I was about 8, and it was a long stitch kit, and we'd gone to Melbourne for a holiday and we were staying in the suburbs and it was quite boring. So I think mum kind of got us some activities to do. And what I really liked about that, I still remember it, just again, it's the materials and these things coming together to create this finished product. And that's what I really like about embroidery. Kind of, it takes you on a journey, it takes you so long to get to the finished product. And yeah, that's what, it's kind of, that's the goal. You kind of have a goal, when it needs to end. Yeah. Unlike painting, it's do I do a bit more or do I not, but
yeah, that's so true.
Yeah, with embroidery, you've kind of, when it's done. We should know when it's done anyway.
There's no more space for thread.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. So yeah, I think when I think back about the textiles and that sort of thing, I always come back to that. My father with relations to materiality, my father is a fisherman, and he used to do game fishing. We'd go fishing for marlins and tuna and things like that, and he used to make his own lures, fishing lures. So he was a plastic engineer, so he'd mold the skirts different colors, but he'd get me to create the heads of them. So I'd be given all these sequins and glitter and all sorts of things like that, and super glue. So probably wasn't really good for like a 10-year-old, but again, having access to those materials is what excites me, and the possibilities with that. So yeah, again, we were making these kind of end products that would hopefully catch fish. I'd have, be given some guidance, like marlins, like, I don't know, red or whatever it was, or, that, and that's what I kind of created the lures from. Yeah.
I love that story. And you actually came back to that with the Seed Gallery exhibition, didn't you?
Yeah. So, Seed Gallery, a small kind of gallery up in Auckland, and I think they've been doing it for over 15 years, but they do a Kids Can fundraiser, so they invite a number of artists to, you're given the same kind of plywood shape, and you get to interpret that shape however you like. And I really love working with beads, and but sometimes like it's one of these challenging materials, because often they're like plastic pony beads, and they have this kind of messaging where they're for children, and for me they're just like, they're so bright and colorful, and you can find them a lot in op shops and things like that, so they're quite plentiful as well. So I thought coming back to that idea, I did this series for the last Seed Gallery fundraiser, and that was fortune lures, and where I created you always get 10 shapes. They're all the same shape, and everyone gets the same shape, but you get 10 of them, and that's what you have to apply your practice to. And so my series, I did 10 different ones, and each one was kind of based off that psychology of color. So again, with the fishing lures, we do different colors to attract different fish. So I was able to live out my sequins and bead dreams through these fortune lures. And each fortune lure had a different color. So unfortunately, I think the last one to sell was the black one, which was good fortune of sleep. So I don't know if that could be translated elsewhere. But so that was, again, really.
Yeah, they're very beautiful. And I know what you mean. It's like, in society, certain materials in the past have been considered, for kids, or not valuable, or, not
or for women.
for women, or not to be taken seriously, in the art world. And I think there's people like Judy Darragh who are sort of breaking that down, which is great. But I still have the same issues with certain materials. I think I shouldn't use that, or it won't be taken seriously if I use that. And I think over time I'm getting better at not worrying about that. But that is a bit of a thing. Although I think it is, it's not quite such a focus. I think there is a little bit more freedom in the art world than there used to be. Would you agree?
I can't really say how, what it was like 30 years ago, because, I would have been a child. But I do feel like there's probably a bit more acceptance, but I still find it challenging being a textile artist. And, that, people do say, it's a bit more, what is the word?
Crafty.
Yeah. And again, it comes back to those kind of historical takes of women's work. So there is, still that underlying challenge of the materials being taken seriously. One of my galleries, they'll say, some people just hate the embroidery. Okay.
Really?
Yeah. So I think people do struggle with it still, especially when you're kind of in that kind of buyer's market as well.
Yeah.
It's sort of something that Nan used to do. So I still find it challenging, but it is something that I find interesting too, because
And you could say that you're pushing boundaries, or you're sort of forcing people out of their comfort zone, which is a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to, upon some of my artworks, you might look at it and it might not actually look like embroidery till you get a bit closer. So, challenging those assumptions. Absolutely.
And it is strange, isn't it, that it's just another medium. I mean, it's a medium, like paint's a medium, thread can be a medium, beads can be a medium.
Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it, that it is viewed in a different way instead of looking at the sort of whole practice.
Yeah, and I suppose artists do dabble with it. They do dabble with embroidery, but it's not something that they kind of stay with. I think a lot of it is it's so time consuming.
Yeah.
And you have to be really dedicated and actually put aside that time to do it. And I love craft-based artworks because you can see the time someone has spent making something. And that's what I love about the craft. Yeah.
Every stitch you can see the love that's gone into it, as well as the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So going back, you clearly had in your mind at high school that you were going to do something artistic and study art, because in 2005 you did a Bachelor of Media Arts and Visual Arts. So how did you get to that point of deciding what you wanted to do, and were you thinking you wanted to be a full-time artist at that early point?
I think originally my older brother went to university late. So I think he I can't remember when he graduated. It was probably when he was about 28, and he made it his mission to put into my head that I was also going to university. So it wasn't about what are you going to do after school, what are you going to study, With regards to art, I was the first year. We were the guinea pigs of the NCEA education standard here in New Zealand, and I was really lucky that for the first time media arts, I should say media studies became a subject. I went to girls' high here in Hamilton, and we were offered so many different subjects and that we could take. So in my final year of school, I did, like I say, media studies, I did drama, I did design and art painting and English. So there was always, I was so lucky that I went to a school that offered so many subjects. And I actually was going to go and do drama down in Wellington because I had a drama teacher here that just, really kind of pushed me and challenged me. But at the end of the day, I wasn't ready to leave home or leave the Waikato. So I decided to stay and do a media arts degree, which was what it was called at the time. I suppose, I never looked back. My dad, as a kid, my dad was always pushed for that we were to be our authentic selves and to be original. Why do you want to look like everyone else? And that was kind of a real driving force of, that sort of thing. Oh, you want to be an artist? Go and be an artist. I was really lucky in that regard that, we could pursue our passions and do what we wanted here.
Isn't that amazing? And that's not that common.
No, no.
Yeah, go Dad.
Yeah,
that's so good.
Yeah,
and then you went on to do a postgraduate diploma in visual communication design in Wellington, and then followed by a diploma in teaching.
Yeah.
So were you thinking that you wanted to be a teacher? And I presume you are an art teacher, is that right?
Yes, I am an art teacher.
Yeah, good.
Yep.
We need people like you.
Yeah. So I after I finished studying, I moved to Melbourne. And when I was studying in Melbourne, it's the opposite when I was living in Melbourne, I should say, I was the opposite to kind of Kirikiriroa, that I felt that everyone's an artist and everyone, is trying to find their piece of the pie. And I found that quite challenging and draining. It was really great, all my friends are artists, and, it was really great network. But yeah, I found it was harder coming from as an outsider to kind of establish a practice there. So I also struggled with this fact because I studied painting in my undergraduate. I always there was a time where I didn't know if I wanted to study graphic design or painting, and then those years after studying, I always had that kind of imposter syndrome. Am I a designer or am I a painter? I really love design, but I studied painting, So I spent about a year reading books on design, and I finally decided, all right, I'm going to go study it. And unfortunately, the fees, as New Zealanders, I think the fees are the same. The university fees are similar in Australia, but it was the fact that I wasn't able to support myself with a student allowance or anything. So I made the decision after being in Melbourne for about 6 years to come back and study design. And that was, I came back to Massey University, so I moved down to Wellington and did my VCD, so visual communication design. And I looked at the ethnobotanical kind of plants that were in Wellington, so the native plants that were kind of everywhere. Wellington has this lovely town belt that kind of, encapsulates the city. And so, during that year of studying design, I went on to create a series of wallpapers that were, influenced from the surrounding forests. But I realized quite quickly that when I was studying design, or after studying design, I realized quite quickly I didn't want to be attached to a computer all day. I didn't want, I didn't want that to kind of be what I was going to do. I didn't want to be connected to, media. You'd spend all day on your computer, doing your uni work, and then to knock off or to relax, you'd put on, Netflix or something. So you're constantly attached to a screen, and I really struggled with that. Yeah. And so I thought at that time, I was like, well, I'm back in New Zealand. I think now's my time to, study teaching. It was always in the back of my mind, but I wasn't ready to be a teacher. I didn't feel, straight out of school, I'd spent, after studying, I think it's 16 years of school, and I didn't want to go straight back into school.
That's a lot.
I needed to leave. I needed to be an adult and do all those sorts of things. And then, but finally, I think I was about 28 when I decided to study and study teaching. Yeah.
Which is so good. And, we need, like I said, more people and more art teachers like you. So the teaching, did that inspire you to kind of grow your own art practice alongside that work? I know being a teacher is pretty consuming, but did you manage to start sort of developing your own artistic style at that stage?
Yeah, I think just being a bit more settled back in New Zealand, and when you're living somewhere like Melbourne, there's always things going on. There's always art exhibitions, there's music concerts, there's always something happening. So even moving back to Wellington, it's just a little bit slower pace. And so I was living in a tiny rental, Māori rental in Wellington, like they all are. And so I didn't really have enough space for making. I've always had a practice. I've always made. After I kind of started teaching, I was kind of a bit more stable. And then I started embroidering. So I was in a tiny house, and embroidery I found something that you could pick up, you could pack up. As a teacher, you get the holidays. Most of my family live in Australia, so I'd spend a lot of time traveling as well. And embroidery is something that you can take on the road, so it's really portable. So I came to it just as a means of necessity, to have, a practice that I could work on no matter where I was.
We're just going to take a very short break for this week's Creative Notice Board. Te Rua Gallery in St Heliers, Auckland, is proud to once again partner with the grassroots charity Give a Kid a Blanket for its annual Fill the Truck Challenge, which is an initiative that reflects the gallery's deep commitment to community, compassion and connection. The drop-off day for dropping off blankets is Saturday the 24th of May, that's this weekend. You can drop them off to Te Rua Gallery, which is 10A Te Rua Street in St Heliers. That is from 9 a.m. till 2 p.m. and there's a car park opposite Te Rua where the truck will be. And you can enjoy live street music from Chris Bates, followed by Jazz Patterson and a community sausage sizzle while you're there. And also I wanted to remind you that we have Connection coming up, which is a Creative Connections podcast group show, and that is featuring the work of more than 60 of the podcast's guest artists. So you can listen to their episodes and then come and have a look at their beautiful work and possibly meet them at opening. It is from June the 23rd till July the 19th at Kumu Arts, that's West Auckland, and opening night is June the 27th, 5 till 8. I'll be making a speech at some point around 6, so I'd love you to make it along and make sure you come and introduce yourself. Now back to Alice. And that was the beginning. So at that stage, were you thinking of yourself as an artist?
I think I've always kind of thought of myself as an artist. But it's one of those things they don't really teach you at, I never really got taught it, but how to apply for shows and how to, enter art competitions and things like that. I was never doing any of that. I had a couple of shows when I was living in Melbourne, but it wasn't until I came back to New Zealand where there were more opportunities I felt to actually apply for things. And I decided I used to keep like quite meticulous kind of sketchbook practice, and thinking about pattern and repetition and ornamentation. Those are always things I've been interested in since I went to art school. And I, for a number of years while living in Melbourne and moving to Wellington, I'd keep this kind of sketchbook practice where I was, repeating shapes or repeating symbols and creating these these ornamental drawings. And I proposed a show. I applied for a show at Toi Pōneke down in Wellington in, I think, 2016. And I proposed to them that I was going to turn these turn these drawings into embroideries. And I actually got the show. So then I just spent a year making embroidery. And this is coming, I didn't really know what I was doing. I knew how to thread a needle, but I had no kind of concept of, quality kind of cotton or how, I was always like, my colors originally were so bright because I was always so worried I was going to dirty the thread with my fingers. So now I've come to I use a lot of pastels and things like that, but as a means of not wanting to destroy the work, they're all these really bright, ghastly colors. So that was that was a really interesting process, and it taught me a lot about materials. Erica Van Zon, who's another embroidery artist, she was working at Toi Pōneke at the time. So when it came to actually presenting the work, because embroidery is quite a small format, and if you've only got a year, you probably get about 12 works if you're working quite quickly. It's about a work a month. She encouraged me to do these really lovely large-scale murals on the walls. And in that kind of exhibition, I'd done these these really intricate, repetitive murals on two of the hero walls in the gallery. And that really helped kind of synthesize or unite that work from the origin of the drawing into the embroidery practice too.
Yeah.
And it also helped fill space, which is, really challenging when you've got a large gallery to fill as well.
I love that. And I I love that connection that you're bringing your drawing and your painting into your embroidery show. That's just such a nice synergy, as you said, That's a good way to work. And then, from there you've done quite a lot of murals and you've managed to sort of incorporate your graphic design and your love of pattern through sort of public art as well as, things like greeting cards and all sorts. And then your textile practice and your painting practice has kind of worked alongside that with your illustration as well. So somehow you've managed to sort of bring all these disciplines together to create a really cohesive art practice.
Sometimes I think like color probably drives the connection of my work, but I sometimes work between figurative and the abstract. And even when I'm working with my students at school, I had one student recently. She was doing an Indian ink drawing with a bamboo skewer, and it was an A3 one, which is just silly. I should have given her A4 at least, or an A5. And she got to the point where she was sick of drawing, and she had been drawing on her computer. And I was like, "What are you doing?" She's like, "Oh, miss, I just need a break." And I was like, "I call that a palette cleanser." And for me, these palette cleansers is when I'm working, I might be working on an embroidery for a month, and then I'm like, nah, I need to do something different just to cleanse the palette.
Yeah.
And that might be, so I might be working on a bit more of a figurative, floral embroidery, and then I need to step back and do something abstract. I just need to kind of cleanse the palette and kind of regroup so I can move back into the next piece. And I think that's kind of why I kind of straddle between these different practices, because when you are doing embroidery, you have a lot of time to think, and you think of ideas that are beyond the embroidery hoop. And I always, when it comes to murals, I feel so constrained again by scale with embroidery. So taking on these murals actually, it allows me to actually play with scale on a grand scale. And I don't know if people know, but I find these murals so incredibly exhausting. They're so physically exhausting, but so rewarding at the same time. But yeah, it's just that kind of shift in scale that really excites me and challenges me too.
And I guess it frees you up a little bit, and then you're sort of ready to come back in.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's like, okay, I've got that out of my system. Yep, we can do something
I love that.
different. Yeah.
That makes sense. And do you feel like your textile part of your practice is the sort of central core, and the other things kind of interact and influence in some way, but that you think of yourself mostly as a textile artist?
Yeah, so it's really interesting that you bring up practice. I recently saw Jeremy Mail, who's the CEO of Creative Waikato here. I recently saw him do a presentation, and he talked about, it was all about creativity, and he talked about how all adults should at least do 2 hours of creative practice a week. And for me, embroidery is that practice. So I do pick up the hoop every night. I try and, after we've got my daughter to bed and things like that, but I do try to do that 1 hour a night of creative practice. Embroidery, like I said, you can pick it up, you can put it down, and it allows for that. Where something like painting, for me anyway, I need to find the flow. And that flow, I need about 2 or 3 hours, just, uninterrupted, to be able to paint. I can't just pick it up and put it down. So for me, embroidery is really, I don't know, it is very integral, and it is that part of my practice. But in the last week or so, I fell down and sprained my wrist, and that means I can't hold a hoop. Yeah. So when things like that happen, I've come back to process. So I've picked up my sketchbook. My right hand's still working, and there's something really freeing about being able to make without product. being the end goal. So it's been really lovely spending these school holidays thinking about process. And my work, it's not about being careful, it's just about mark making. I really love, with my workbook, I really love stickers. So I buy lots of sticky dots and vinyl. I cut vinyl out and stick it down, and collage pieces and things like that. And my daughter, who's Daphne, who's 2.5, she'll scribble, do her scribbles on one page, and that just becomes like the background. So
I love that.
Yeah, so going back, yes, embroidery is the integral part until you hurt your hand. And then you have to find a way around that. Yeah.
And that's the great thing about sort of being multidisciplinary in that way, that you can kind of think, actually today this is what I need, or, for whatever reason, you can kind of dip in and out, which is kind of what I do with my practice. And, you speaking of allowing yourself sort of process focused time or experimental time is just so valuable. And lately I've got open studios coming up, and I've just thought I actually just need time to experiment. And it has been the best time in my life, honestly, because at the moment there's quite a lot of other stresses happening in my world, and that is my haven. And I've never really let myself just go and play. And I'm not thinking about what might be taken seriously or what might be sold or who might like this. I'm actually just doing stuff for me. And it is so good for my well-being.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. There was there was a period in my life for about 5 years where I was working back-to-back shows, just generating so much work for galleries, for group shows, for prizes, for I wouldn't say no to anything. And when you are just making for a final product, it becomes really exhausting. You don't have that kind of time to reflect on the work you've done. You don't even have the time to sit with the work. It's those sorts of things. You're just putting it out into the universe, and it doesn't feel like a complete work because you haven't had that time to reflect. And I think, as I've become a mother, my priorities shifted. And I'm actually quite lucky that since I haven't really applied for anything since Daphne was born, I've only just kind of taken on things that people have asked me to do. I'm really fortunate that people do ask me to participate in shows and things like that. But that's allowed me to sit with works and have them hanging on, the wall in the house for, 6 months or something before they leave me. And there's something that, for me, I feel more comfortable living with the works before sending them out into the universe. So
I totally agree. And I almost feel like the work that I've made through this very cathartic process, I actually don't want anyone to take. They're like my little babies who have helped me through a time, and I'm very attached to them. And it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how people actually respond to the work. But and having a child can bring different things to the way you work. Not always positive, I guess, but I love the way you frame that time with your daughter of a residency in motherhood, which really makes sense. It's like you're in this long-term residency at the moment, and you may not ever, well, you won't ever pop out of that, I guess. So how does that affect your practice, apart from what we've just talked about, and what do you think motherhood brings to your work?
I think it's really nice to actually be able to share the making process with someone else. We as artists, we often work in solitude, and just being able to bring Daphne up into the studio, and I'll get her to help me dye fabric or paint fabric, or she'll like I said before, create marks on, create some marks. If she's got a pen and she draws over something, I just really embrace that. And I really, it's just for her, I don't want it to be seen as anything else than what we do together. It's just another thing we do, like, going to kick the ball outside. I think, just being a mother, you really have to, for me anyway, I still do, but take on a lot of projects. And I think it's been really important to kind of think about what really matters and actually kind of shift your priorities and think about, what it is you kind of want to be or want to do at the end of the day. So, it's just,
I love that you let Daphne, add her marks, and it's just such a beautiful thing. And what a lucky youngster to have that kind of influence. And then as an adult, it will just be normal. Creativity will just be part of her DNA.
Yeah, and that's that thing, with people, with children, and, if you can't find that time to be creative, do it with your kids, It's, get some chalk, go draw on the fence outside, or, maybe get some chalk, draw like a road on the ground outside, play with the cars, it's endless, those types of things that you can do that are creative, but, don't take too much time or energy.
So true. So let's just start digging into your process or your practice a little bit more. I love the way you have, it's almost like you have sort of slightly different series within your practice. So you've got your botanical or floral works, which come through your paintings and your designs, illustration and textile works. What is it about nature or flowers that really draws you in, do you think?
I think as humans, we rely on plants to feed us. We rely on them to help us breathe, shelter, to clothe us. They're really kind of fundamental to us as humans. And I really like using botanics, and I've looked at different ones over the years. So when I moved back to New Zealand, I looked at native plants, and being a teacher, I've got this kind of this love of lifelong learning. So when I am kind of interacting with the plants, I learn a lot about the plants. I learn about their uses, their history, and things like that. So again, it's a way to kind of investigate, or to research as well, and to nourish the mind. I think growing up, we're so lucky living in New Zealand and having nature at our doorstep. And when I grew up, we grew up on a gully, and so we always had the native trees. Mum always had a beautiful garden, and it was always part of just living. This is what we do. We've got plants, we've got flowers, we've got veggies, all that sort of thing. And I remember saying to my dad, "Oh, my favorite color is green because that's the color of nature." And I still think that nature's always been important to me. When I've moved back to Hamilton, this is when I kind of started this kind of investigation with the botanics and the flowers that I can grow, and having it finally for the first time in my life, having a place where I can literally grow roots. I've carted around house plants for years and years and years, but I've never been able to lay these kind of roots in the ground. And now that I'm kind of in that position to do so, I'm really interested even in the changing of seasons. This last summer in Kirikiriroa has been so hot, and my garden has suffered, and it's really interesting to see the ones that thrive in different conditions. And your garden is never the same. It's constantly ever evolving, renewing with, it's just this constant, it's always in flux. And having a home garden is this kind of, it's a result of this kind of relationship, this like between the garden and the gardener. and you can influence the way that garden is. And I often think what happens, if we were all to leave, all to disappear off the earth, and how our plants would take over, and what it would look like, which ones, would outlive each other, because, got lots of all these introduced plants. But yeah, it's just this constant source of inspiration. I love the history of plants. And the way they look, obviously.
Yeah, they're so beautiful. And there's nothing like tending a garden. I think it's a little bit like having an art practice in a way. It's very therapeutic, and it's very visual.
Yeah.
And it's all about the same things that you have to consider as an artist in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually was reading something funny the other day. In times of recession, everyone turns back to plant art, which I think is quite interesting, because the garden has always been a source of inspiration for artists. Yeah,
and it's almost sort of simplifying and just coming back to to your roots as such.
Yeah,
and I find that gardening, there's something about the way you sort of tend plants. It's almost like they become your children. Oh, it sounds so corny, but it's you're taking care of something, and I think there's something deeply connecting about that.
Yeah, and I've been taking my bouquets of flowers into work and things like that to school, and I've started doing some guerrilla gardening at school. The caretaker doesn't know this, but I've been sowing. I've been sowing, some of my seeds from home in the gardens outside the art block, because, why not? See what happens. Because that's the other thing. I've got some paper flowers, and they, have these beautiful seeds, and, you just see what happens. Throw some out, see what happens. So
yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so good. And we can talk about your process in a minute, but can we also talk about the way you use text sometimes in your work? Sometimes that is quite political, or sort of commenting on something that is happening in society. For example, the Yes thread work that you made, which was in 2017, responding to the same-sex marriage bill that had been passed. So you use text in different ways for different reasons, I suspect. And I guess you're communicating something sometimes personal and sometimes political. What are you thinking with those works, and how do they develop?
I think, there's some really great text artists, and I didn't think you'd ever ask me about text. And I suppose text comes back from that love of design, and typography and things like that. And I think it's John Reynolds, who's a Melbourne artist who's purely text-based, and he does these beautifully large paintings using text, and I really love his work. I just wanted to mention that. But yeah, text, I think a lot of it used to come from songs and music, and I used to spend a lot of time listening to music, not so much now, which is a bit of a shame, only really in the car, but using music as that kind of way to process emotions or feelings, or make sense of the world. And, collecting, I really love those kind of idioms, or the work of Zoe Brand, who's another Australian artist who shows at Masterworks. And she also finds these kind of interesting pieces of text, which might just be words that we've never really considered. We just use in everyday conversation, but we've never really considered them on their own. I think text, it can be quite literal, and that's why I really like it when there is a play on words. And I often name my artworks using song lyrics, or when I come across these kind of sentences or paragraphs or pieces of text, I record them. And, depending on what it is I'm trying to say, I usually embed them in the naming of the works. I did a show, I think it was in 2018, 2019, called Pictorial Architecture. And it was a very geometric based show. It was, I showed it down in Hamilton at Arts Post. And at the time, I was really frustrated with the housing market and just the housing inequality of New Zealand. And these works were really quite structured. And I used text as a kind of statement. So all the works were named after the kind of the advertising bylines that real estate agents use to sell houses, things like, the best house on the block, or, so much potential, these sorts of kind of slogans, and they just rinse and repeat. And it's really interesting because it kind of gives you a glimmer into actually what the house might be, like a first home buyer's dream or something. You're like, oh, that doesn't sound like a very good house. But that was a way to kind of, even though the art didn't necessarily reference that, but that was a way to kind of vent my frustrations at society at the time. And I think that's kind of what I use it for. Some of it, it's a bit of humor, it's a bit of like poking fun at stuff. For example, I did a series called Blooming Mad, and it was a series, just of kind of floral works, but playing, with that thing of, oh, you are blooming mad, I really like that kind of humor, that text.
And provides. It seems like you're using the text sometimes within your artworks and sometimes just in the title, but in both ways they are communicating something that you're thinking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, which is cool. And then speaking of houses, you did have you have had sort of an architectural style that comes and goes through your practice. Where does that come from, and what are you communicating there?
I think, as I've become a mother, the house does, I did a series actually when I was pregnant with my daughter, and it was part of a show up at Pa Homestead. I did these large scale, they were 1 meter by 1 meter kind of quilted works that was stretched over canvas, and I was really like thinking about how like Māori call the womb the whare tangata, and when you are pregnant or carrying a baby, you are a house. And those series of works just kind of reflected that. I've always been kind of interested in kind of wacky architecture, having lived in Wellington, and you've got Ian Athfield houses and Roger Walker houses everywhere. That just, like, why do we need to make these boring kit set houses everywhere? And that's still a frustration I have now. I live in a suburb in Hamilton where they just clear the land. So they clear all the trees and, all the gardens. They just clear the land and put up these kit set houses that are just really cheap to make. And it's like, I often think, what if he's just spent $100 more grand on the house? What would it look like? Why do we need to kind of, make these, why do we just need to go with fit for purpose? Why can't we make it a little bit more livable, a little bit nicer on the, nicer,
with a little bit of character would be nice.
And having those environmental considerations, it's that kind of lack of long-term planning that really annoys me. So but and again, we're so lucky that we do have houses and shelter and things like that, but I think when I was making those houses works, I was definitely thinking about being a house myself.
I love that. And then some of your thread works were really responding to your experiences in pregnancy, like the baby kicks and that kind of thing, which was almost like some sort of graphic notation sort of version of your pregnancy, which is really amazing. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. And let's just start speaking about your process. So materiality seems to be a big part of the way you work. And I think you do start with your material first, don't you? And then go on to drawing. Is that right?
Yeah. So most of the materials I use, probably 90% of them are all found materials, whether they've come from an op shop or trade me or given to me. Crafting, the crafters are mad people, me being one of them, but we kind of have a tendency to hoard stuff. So oftentimes you can find a lot of it available in op shops, and every time I go to an op shop, I just make a beeline to the craft section. And so over the years, I've been able to accumulate a lot of materials and things that interest me. So when I'm setting out to make a work, I think I suppose sometimes I have a frame already made, so that will determine the size. But I also, I'm like, what do I feel like working with? There's certain materials that I won't work with in summer. So, for example, like a latch hook rug, I won't make a latch hook rug in summer because it's a wool-based work. The wool that I use is often 50 years old and it's really fibrous. Another thing that I won't work on in summer is like a quilt. So it depends. So it's a seasonal thing, which is a little bit interesting. So and then just thinking about what I want to work with. So I might have found like a really great so like embroidery fabric from the op shop, and I'll be like, right, this is what we're working with. So then I have to pick the materials that are going to work with that. I like working with, old fabrics. So, old curtains and sheets and things like that might have kind of an image underneath that I can use. I could slowly build up or reinterpret that. That's kind of a guideline. Sometimes I work on plastic canvas, and so plastic canvas is just kind of like a square canvas, and that's quite good because it doesn't require a hoop, so it's quite light. So I might work on plastic canvas after I've been working with a really heavy hooped embroidery because my hand is sore from holding the hoop.
Yeah, it's practicalities.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think, like, in terms of my favorite kind of thing to work with is the stranded embroidery thread, which is it's a DMC thread which you find on little bobbins. They still, how unfortunately our haberdasheries are few and far between these days, but the Ribbon Rose has probably the best selection. Definitely in Auckland, probably in New Zealand. So so I really like using the stranded embroidery, double it over with the needle, and then usually into like a heavy linen and fabric. So I really like using natural materials. I will very rarely ever use acrylic, and that's because I find natural materials they don't really knot. The colours are all quite similar. They don't rub. I find, you might work with acrylic and it might rub, or it just gets a bit tatty. So it's really important that, apart from the plastic canvas, but I love working with natural fibres.
Nicer to handle too, aren't they? And so sometimes you can see that you are creating stitches on the linen, and then other times your backing must have holes in it. Is that right? And it's more of a cross stitch or kind of stitch from one hole to another. So I find linen quite good, especially kind of like a dress linen. It's it's a loose weave, so it's easier to push your needle through. And as far as your actual process for approaching an artwork, once you've thought about the materials, do you start designing in your scrapbooks? Is that where it starts?
It really depends on the work that I'm making. I often call a lot of my work drawing with thread. So a lot of the time it is just a drawing. So it could be akin to a sketchbook drawing, but I'm actually just using the thread as someone else might use a coloured pencil. So a lot of that, it's just an exploration of the materials. When I am creating something that has a bit more of a compositional, I suppose, that's probably more concerned with composition. There's different ways that I approach it. I have been, I often go and take my own photos of plants and trees and things like that. So they often come from these photos that I've taken. And what I might do is I'll put them into Illustrator and turn them into these kind of line drawings. So then I have this kind of reference. I've kind of rendered it, I've simplified the original drawing. And this process I use for painting as well. So I take these photos, simplify them using Illustrator, and then what I might do is there's a couple of ways I do it. Sometimes I will print off the work, and I will use carbon paper to actually trace the work or trace the image onto either the fabric or onto the painting canvas. If I'm working with something like some fabrics do it, as well as the kind of the plastic embroidery thread. Sometimes, depending on what I have at home, I will actually just put the plastic embroidery canvas straight onto the computer screen, and it's actually backlit, so I can actually trace that way too, which is actually kind of like a problem solving thing when I haven't got everything with me or I'm a bit stretched for time. So yeah, those are two ways that I get the composition onto the kind of base fabric. But yeah, a lot of the time it is just kind of drawing as I go. It's a doodle. It's this kind of really obsessive doodle that's taken me hours and hours and hours. I might set out some rules. I recently did a work that was called "All the Shit on the Rug." Literally all the shit on the rug. Excuse my swearing.
Love it. Really swear.
And that was kind of inspired by, all the shit that's on the rug all the time, having a toddler. That one there, I embroidered using wool, all kind of found wool. It's kind of got this checkerboard pattern that runs through the back of it, and that checkerboard pattern is actually kind of a result of not having enough white wool. So I often have to make these kind of decisions or problem solve, like, okay, so I don't actually have enough white wool to kind of do this whole piece. How am I going to work around it? So that one there, I added, different kind of light pastel colors to create a checkerboard pattern to make that wool, go further. And as I was drawing the different motifs, using the wool, stitching the different motifs, it was different. It was oftentimes what was on the floor in front of me. So that, there's like a tennis ball, there's like a toy rattle, there's flowers, there's some random splodges. As a parent, there's always weird kind of substances that you find on the floor. But yeah, that piece grew over time as I was making it. What's on the floor today? When I was looking for a new motif to put it in. That work took a long time to do, and it's really lovely. It's really lovely, heavy, kind of fine wool work. And I took it to my framers, got really lovely framers here in Hamilton called Framing House. And they're really great to work with. I used to be really afraid of framing because I'd had these bad experiences where you spend all this money and it doesn't elevate the work. Yeah. So they're artists. They come from the artists first and then framers second. So they're always looking for innovative ways to frame your work. So
that's amazing to have that. Actually, I was wondering about that because you also use what's the other frame?
Oh, Lauren Redican.
Yeah, Lauren Redican.
Yeah.
She does all the sort of the slightly wonky frames.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've always wondered that. Sorry to interrupt, but do you actually you work in a hoop? You might work in a hoop or on a square, but then do you take it to the framer and they put it onto something and then frame it and attach it?
Yes. Well, that's the idea, but I'm not I'm a bit of a rebellious embroiderer where I'm self-taught. and I don't do things the way I should do. And so sometimes my works end up a bit warped because I haven't, I probably should have been stitching it in like a rectangle frame rather than a hoop. And so, but luckily my framers are okay and very supportive of all sorts of things that I bring into them. So that work finished with a horrible like warp on it, and I think any like properly trained embroiderer would just like, what am I looking at? But Steph, who's my framer, she's like, we'll just make a frame for it. We'll just make like this, kind of, I can't think of the word. Is it a rhombus?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's got two
Like
it's got two
square,
parallel lines, and then
a
two
square on its side kind of thing.
Yeah, that's
leaning
it.
over. Yeah.
Yeah. And so she created this custom frame, but even the diagonal lines, they're not parallel to each other. So it is this really custom made frame for that piece. And that's a really great example of working with a framer to elevate your work. You do spend a lot of money on framing, so it should be there to elevate it.
Yeah. And I love the way you use color. It's sometimes you're bringing out a color that's in your work, but sometimes it's really quite contrasting, and it's just so beautiful. As you said, it's the making of the work. Sometimes it's that final touch.
Yeah, and I remember when I first kind of started making embroideries and things, and talking to someone who worked in a dealer gallery, and they're like, no, you should just use black and white for framing. People don't like colored frames.
Really?
And I kind of adhered to that. And my show that I talked about earlier, the pictorial architecture show, they were all on these kind of wooden frames, and I just like felt so ingenuous about that. I was like, they should have been in color frames, and it's that one of those kind of points in your life where you're like, no, you're the artist. You can listen to, listen to yourself and believe, in your gut. And working with Lauren, I've worked with her for a long time, and using her frames. And what I really loved about working with Lauren's frames is she sends you the frames and I can put the work in it. So I can plan work for the frame, knowing what it's going to look like. I can test it in the frame
as I go. Good.
Yeah.
And do you have to put sorry, just being a person who sometimes does embroidery, I'm actually quite fascinated in the way you process your frames. Do you actually for those ones where you've got the backing board supplied with the frame which you can put on, do you have to put like a padding underneath, or can you just put it straight onto the board, and then how do you actually attach it?
So Lauren's boards come with foam core, so I get the foam core backing. So, and then I thread it behind it to, I can't think of the proper name for it right now. It does have a proper name. But so I will essentially sew it around the back of the foam core. So sew the work to itself around the back of the foam core, and then put it into the frame. And then there's a backing board, and then there's it's really easy with some they're called framers arrows or framers
pins.
Yeah, they're like little,
I know what you mean.
Yeah. And then you can just pop those in, and you've got this kind of finished product like that. And
that's great.
It's really empowering, I think. Initially I found really challenging trying to find a framing solution, and now I'm really lucky I've got a few to choose from.
Well, it would be so depressing to create a beautiful stitch work and then have it sort of ruined in your eyes by a framer.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Sorry, just a little bit of picking your brain. As you're saying, you are a teacher and an art educator in general. You've done lots of different sort of community workshops and amazing things like that. And you are a real advocate for the visual arts in Aotearoa. You have been on the executive committee of the Aotearoa New Zealand Association of Art Educators, and you've just finished a conference, which I imagine would have been pretty intense, but amazing. What is it that makes you want to be an advocate for visual arts in New Zealand?
I think unfortunately when you teach a subject like visual arts, it's just part of the parcel where you're constantly having to fight and advocate for your subject and the importance of arts in education. We've just seen, like, over in Australia where the government have kind of taken funding away from arts degrees, and they've made arts degrees more expensive, where something like a veterinarian degree much more cheaper. So it's actually like creating a divide there. I've got friends who work at the tertiary educations over in Melbourne, and like the kids or the students that are coming to them, they come from these kind of quite privileged backgrounds, and that's not what arts should be. Arts should be accessible. It should be open to everyone. And yeah, that sort of stuff, really kind of disheartens me. So yeah, when you do teach art, a subject like art, you do have to fight for it. And a lot of the work that we've had to do with ANZAAE is making sure that art stays front and center in the curriculum. So I think art, especially visual art, it is accessible. You don't actually have to be good at art, good with the quotation marks, to enjoy art. And I really get disheartened when I hear stories of like, oh, I used to love art, but then I had this horrible teacher and just put me off for life. And I don't think, hopefully, no one should be in a place to experience that. At my own school, and this is the same with a lot of educators, the art route becomes a refuge for a lot of students that have nowhere else or don't feel like they fit in anywhere else at school. We even have students that are not art students that come to the art rooms as a refuge. And, I feel like, even listening to your podcast, Mandy, that a lot of artists, that's where they felt safe, and that's what kind of helped them pursue their kind of passion for arts and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, hearing you talking like that is just, it actually makes me feel a little bit emotional, because I think, as you said, a lot of the guests that I've spoken to have had either a negative or a super positive experience, which has really shaped their lives, from art teachers or teachers in general. And it's a very powerful thing. And the fact that children are seeking refuge in schools is kind of sad anyway, but then it is so great that the art room can provide that. And it just, it really worries me at the moment in Aotearoa that, the government at the moment, the current government, aren't valuing creativity. It's not really even spoken of at the moment, I feel, and primary school curriculum particularly is really suffering. And, I work with teachers and help them to, with visual arts professional development. And literally schools aren't booking me now because they have A, no money for the arts, and B, no time to commit to that because it's all about numeracy and literacy. So I think art educators in New Zealand anyway have got quite a hard road to tread at the moment.
Yeah, it is very challenging. I've worked in, and it depends on the centres and schools that you work for. I've worked at an intermediate. I worked there very briefly when I was pregnant with Daphne, and the DP at the time just said, "Oh, just find something off Pinterest." And it's when I hear that in that sort of setting, it's like that's not what the arts curriculum is designed for. And there are these kind of assumptions in senior management that arts is just something that you can find on Pinterest. And Pinterest is a great place for a wealth of ideas and things like that, but that just kind of shows how some people do value it. And I'm lucky that I am at a school that does value the arts, and I wouldn't be at a school that didn't value the arts in that way. It's
Mm.
really challenging. We're living in, these times where there's not a lot of funding. Everyone's fighting over the same small amounts of funding that are available. We, as art educators, we used to have this really lovely forum called Arts Online, and we could, it doesn't matter if you're a soul teacher down in the depths of the South Island, you could put your question out to a forum and these people would ask. And a lot of that funding that's come, or like the government cuts, has come from that. And that's, it's just further isolating teachers. It's further impacting students, because at the end of the day we can make these policy decisions, but at the end of the day it affects our students, our akona, our rangatahi, our tamariki. Like, that's who suffers for these decisions. So we're always going to have to fight, it's not nice sometimes.
It's such a shame that you do have to fight.
Yeah.
And it's people like you who, contribute so much to the arts in Aotearoa, but also to those tamariki who are experiencing, what you're offering them. It's important work.
Yeah. So we've often, like, the work that ANZAAE do, there's a lot of advocacy work. It's connecting teachers, art educators, those ones that are isolated. It's also being, sharing of resources. I'm an advocate of sharing of art resources. I'm currently creating some resources that will be available nationwide. But, when people keep those to themselves and don't share them to the wider world, at the end of the day, it's just our students that are suffering.
Yeah. And that's what it's all about, is the students. That's what's important. Yeah. Anyway, we could go down a whole big rabbit hole with all of that. And I think, there's a lot of people out there who feel very passionate about art education, and that's a good thing. So can we just go on to your galleries? You are with Masterworks Gallery in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, and the Mandarin Tree, which is one of your local Kirikiriroa galleries. And you have worked with other galleries at various times with group shows. So the Masterworks do seem to really value textile art. They have some amazing group shows around, I guess, more craft-based practices. So how did you connect initially with Masterworks?
I think it was 2020. I was creating a lot of work, and I just got an email one day from Christine, the director, saying I think it was a show to coincide with the textile symposium that was happening in Tamaki Makaurau at the time. So it was like, would you like to put some work into this? And so I did. And after that, they were like, oh, would you like some representation up in Auckland? So that kind of came quite organically from there. I really love Masterworks. They're kind of object-based artwork, and it spans from jewellery to glass to textiles. There's a lot of raranga, fibre work, all sorts of things, and I really love that there is a space for that up in Auckland, and that I think they're as old as me, so I think they've been around since 1986 as well. So I think that's a testament to the work that they do, and the need for that. I really, I'm in being a full-time kind of art teacher, I am in a kind of position that any money that I do make from my own work, I try and put back into the art kind of network. So oftentimes they end up getting my money put back into into the gallery, because the artists that they support and things like that are just ones that I want in my house, or jewelry that I want to wear, and that's it's really important that when you are working with galleries, that you do kind of understand and appreciate the ethos, and are on the same side as that.
I have noticed your rings. They're very cool. I love those.
Francis Starkle. Yeah, I love
What's that?
Francis Starkle is a
okay.
Whanganui-based jeweler. Yes.
Oh, that's so good. I have to look into her. And as far as marketing yourself goes, I mean, obviously your gallerists help you with that. How do you find getting out there on social media? Also, actually, just in addition to that, sorry to interrupt again, you also have sort of been part of publications and other things like that. So and in numerous group shows. Mm-hmm. So you're obviously quite good at getting yourself out there, even though you have another full-time job. So you're doing well in that way. What are your tips, and how do you approach marketing?
Yeah, I think I used to be a lot better at it. And I used to show a lot of my work as I made it, but I've kind of made a made a decision. I do have a show coming up at Masterworks up in August, and I've kind of made a decision not to show as much of the work on social media before the show. I kind of want to leave some surprises and things like that. And that's completely different from how I would usually work, because, I'm so excited. I've made this kind of finished product and I want to share it with the world. I think, social media has been such an amazing way to connect with other artists. Sure, it's a great platform for promotion and things like that, but you have these artists where you've been following each other for years, and you finally meet, you finally connect, and you've got all this kind of stuff to talk about. You know each other, despite never having met each other. And that's that way where you have these people that you admire, and then suddenly they're your mate. And I really love the way that social media connects people. It's, in terms of using it as a marketing tool, I think, creating like a consistency of style is really important. Even though, recently Instagram have changed from a square format to a rectangle format. And it's like, no, I made everything to fit the composition of a square format. It's so annoying.
It's like, oh my God.
Yeah. So it's that sort of thing. And, making sure that you're taking photos under good light, and maybe saying a bit about the work as well. Years ago, hashtags and things like that worked with, connecting with other people across the world. But, it's changed a lot, I think.
I did read somewhere recently that you shouldn't use more than 4 hashtags. So there's so many different schools of thought. It's really confusing.
Yeah, and just, I try and be quite gracious with anyone who spends time leaving a comment or feedback or anything like that, it's important, being an artist and a teacher, it can be quite lonely at times, and you don't really have any way to kind of get any feedback. And, when you are working, in your kind of studio and things like that, having the platform like social media can really help start a discussion or, question, or, allow for kind of idea generation beyond what you've already made. Yeah,
it can be good. But I think the downside to social media sometimes is that you put things out and you get no response, which I find sometimes quite... It's not that I'm doing things to get a response, but sometimes you do wonder after a while if anyone is actually out there,
I think that
if you're just kind of throwing stuff out into the ether and nobody's seeing it or absorbing it.
Yeah, I think often that's probably comes down to the algorithms, and, I'm not too sure how Meta, work these things out, but and then there's also that kind of, I think, it's 2025 now. I even have students at school that don't want their work on Instagram because they don't want their work, skimmed for AI. And I think that's a very fair kind of assumption for them as well, like to actually be aware and curious of where our data goes. So it's such a catch-22.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It'll actually be interesting to see where social media goes in the next 5 years. I just
Yeah.
wonder if it's going to change a bit with AI and where that's going to go as well. But that's another rabbit hole.
Yes.
Let's not go there. So I guess it might be time for us to get onto our final questions. It's been so interesting speaking with you. I just have a couple of random personal questions. Well, not personal, but questions from me. What is your favourite medium to use, and what medium do you think has the most impact for you and for your audience?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think if I go back to the bare bones, I'd probably say my favorite in medium to work is probably my Prismacolor colored pencils and like my Posca pens. And it's that going back to that kind of sketchbook practice, because you've got this wealth of color, that you can choose from. And with the Posca pens, the paint markers, so they can, paint over top of stuff as well. So you can almost create a painting using kind of painting processes in a sketchbook just with coloured pencils and the paint markers. So, that's kind of probably, if I had to default, if I had to go somewhere, that's probably what I would take with me.
Really?
If stuck on a desert island.
That's interesting. And that's where it all started, I suppose.
Yeah, it is. And, again, it's that portability. Sometimes I see other artists where they find it challenging when they're known for one thing and then they try and break out of that style. It's often style. So they, they often, are known for that style. And I find that people know me for embroidery. So, again, it's that sort of thing. If I post painting or something like that, I don't get as much engagement from, social media. When I do, give them something else that's not embroidery. So, I think, and that's something that I'd like to kind of shift over the next few years, because, at the heart of it, I am a painter at the end of the day, and the embroidery came out of like a necessity. And now I have a studio space, I have space to create, but again, it's time. So it is, balancing that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I read that you said it's humbling to revisit old works, seeing how my tacit knowledge has developed over the years. So how do you feel looking back, your work has evolved?
Yeah, I suppose like I talked about that first show I did over under at Tuiponiki, and the colours that I used were so bright and clashing. And over the years, that kind of understanding of colour has really developed. I feel more confident with my use of colour. And I suppose technique as well. So, knowing which materials work with which fabrics, and that kind of cuts down time, because you can create things quicker and easier. I have a canvas work from that first show, the Tuiponiki show, and I keep it as a reminder of where I've come. So, the stitching, sometimes it's gone the wrong way, and some threads have been pulled really tight and some have been, are loose, and it's that sort of thing. So it's that control.
And you referred to yourself earlier as a self-taught artist, but you have degrees in visual art. What makes you define yourself as a self-taught artist?
I'd say I'm a self-taught textile artist. So, I have degrees in fine arts, which was mainly, painting, looking at painting and drawing. There was a little bit of thread, but when it comes to embroidery and craft, that's all self-taught. And having, I've been to some workshops when I was part of the Embroiderers Guild down in Wellington, and, they often provided these really lovely workshops once a year where you actually had opportunities to sit with other embroiderers and makers, even though I was probably 20 to 30 years younger than everyone else. But so everything is just, I've just tried everything. never really looked at YouTube videos or anything like that. It's just kind of this intuitive process that's developed over the years.
Yeah.
Just through my love of materials. Yeah.
Yeah. And it feels like it's so connected to your painting and drawing practice anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
It all makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, let's do these last little questions. What do you think is the biggest challenge being an artist?
I think other people have said this too, but it's time. And yeah, just juggling, work and home. And yeah, unfortunately, as a secondary school teacher, it's very hard to work part-time. We're still required to kind of be on site every day. So it's not really it's probably the worst part about the job is that, it doesn't really lend itself to part-time. Times, it's just the most challenging thing.
Yeah.
And I think it was Alice Fennessy, who you spoke to recently, she's also said the same thing. We kind of get stuck into this this kind of fear of, am I wasting my time? Is this good enough? Like when you are creating, you're not really enjoying it because you're using your time and you don't know if you're using your time right, or that's the best use of your time at that moment. And I really feel that as well.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. And that sort of time, the time restraints in some ways, that is what can sometimes lead you to be more product focused.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, which isn't always good. I actually don't know how you do it. Do you ever imagine yourself working full time on your art practice?
I do, but I also, there's something about the security, having grown up very working class, is that kind of security net of a solid income that I still is really important to me. So that's something I would have to come to terms with before I'd be able to do it full time. But I'd definitely like more time, to dedicate to that. Yeah.
Yeah. And who inspire you artistically?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this question, and you take inspiration from everywhere, and just even all the disciplines that I work across and that sort of stuff. There's different people that I keep coming back to, even as a teacher. You're like, you guys all need to learn the test cutouts, this is so great, and they're like, Miss, really? But so there's certain things that you come back to. But I was thinking about when I first went to art school, and I came across this Brazilian artist called Beatrice Milhais, and she creates these kind of it's almost these kind of deconstructed ornamental large scale paintings. So you have these kind of motifs that look like they've come from wallpaper, next to these kind of bold modernist kind of abstract forms, and you might have a repeated pattern in there and things like that. And her use of color and motif and just her composition has always really inspired me. I really love just the way she brings in all these elements to her work. Another artist that I really love is Paul Yor. Paul Yor is a queer artist, I think based in Melbourne, Australia. Works across like textiles, really bold, vivid colours, and a lot of it is it's kind of rooted in politics. And kind of looking at the rights of Indigenous Australians and the rights of queer people and things like that. But the way that Paul uses textiles as kind of the foundation for that is like, I really love it. You might walk into a room and not realise you're looking at political artwork. It's not until you start engaging with the artwork you realise what you're looking at. And Paul also, I remember they've recently done a really immersive installation in Australia in the last couple of years where, they've got, the work, but then they've actually designed the space that the work sits within. I remember, maybe in 2012, I went to a similar show like that of Paul's, I think at the substation in Melbourne, and I just, being immersed in all this like neon craft stuff. It was just, really exciting to me. And I was really lucky. was in a group show a couple of years back, where Paul was also in the show. So, arts has that really great way to kind of bring you together with your kind of the people you admire.
Yeah. Oh, well, we're going to have to say goodbye. It's been such a pleasure to meet you, Alice. Thank you so much for spending some time on your busy schedule with me. You've had to go next door to your in-laws so that you've got some quiet time away from lovely Daphne. It's been really interesting talking to you, and thank you so much, and thank you for all the things that you're doing for your students as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mandy, and thank you for the work you do for artists as well, and taking that time and actually providing a space for us all to tell our stories and our narratives and things like that. It's so important to keep the arts thriving in Aotearoa.